Today is National Cold Brew Day, so quick plug for Mike's brand Stoked. Hopefully everyone's had their coffee and is ready to rock and roll because we're jumping right into a very exciting topic, retail media and that disruption. Quickly to introduce myself, Mike Sandor. I lead the East Coast sales team at Quantcast with a Q. And Quantcast has been measuring the open internet for about 15 years. Right now, over 100 million websites use our technology to understand behaviors and media interests, consumption patterns across the digital open web. Our DSP uses AI and machine learning to connect those behaviors and find repeatable patterns of intent to drive outcomes for our brand marketing partners. And I'm lucky to be here today with a true authority in the retail media space, Mike Sillett from Danone. Mike, you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, and thanks for saying Danone. Most people think Dannon, and we don't have much of an ad budget for brand Dannon. So if you call on Dannon, sorry, we don't have any money, but if you call on Danone North America, we've got a portfolio of brands like Stoke, thank you for the shout out, International Delight, Silk, many others. So yeah, I lead the paid media team for Danone North America, and we work with Wavemaker, who's here in this building, and they're our agency of record, and we also oversee sponsorship and licensing.
I read yesterday, I mean, it's common knowledge to everyone in this room, obviously, that retail media is one of the fastest growing channels. I read yesterday from the World Advertising Research Center that it is going to predict it to be the fastest growing channel in both globally and North America this year. Every time there's fast growth into a channel, that also means that there's going to be tons of challenges, lots of disruption. So I'd love to learn a little bit more about how you are all navigating that challenge, particularly to drive incremental growth for your brands.
Yeah, thanks. It's definitely a high growth and large growing market right now. I think a few big execs from Walmart recently had their earnings reports, and they are out talking about how they've never seen margin structures as attractive as what ad sales can bring in. You know, it's a $2 billion plus business at Walmart. Amazon 2022 ad sales was over 40 billion, and that's a 10-year-old business. That's monster growth in a very short period of time. And I think they're really excited about how the pandemic really drove a shift in consumer behavior to online and omni-channel shopping. It's driving a ton of eyeballs and audiences to their properties, building their databases and allowing them to re-engage those audiences across all sorts of different touch points with many different media partners. So I think that's the big shift that's attracted, the investment. The margin is super attractive for them to keep investing. For us to be able to reach those audiences and get the closed loop reporting, super attractive right now. But like I said, it's really disruptive. Also with the video landscape changing a lot from big declines in linear to a lot of people getting into streaming, not only launching every partner with a plus afterwards, but just many, cord nevers now watching. So for us, we've been trying to navigate both the shift into retail media as well as the shift to streaming. And those two have kind of come to a head, and you could have seen the news yesterday about Kroger and Disney, for example, as one example. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's another massive shift. Just to raise their hands, who has recently cut their cord in the last year? So I made that change maybe slightly later than most after the pandemic, but I'd love to learn a little bit about how that shift to linear to streaming is changing your planning for the upfronts.
Yeah, and I think for us it was a journey that started about 2 years ago when we were working with Wavemaker and looked ahead at the upfront market and saw steep declines in ratings in linear, pretty significant increases in certain day parts. I mean, you had prime time going up by over 20%. For us, we started looking at the consumer behavior, seeing, our audiences were still spending over 30 hours a week watching great programming. And a lot of that was happening on streaming partners that were recently launching ad-supported services. We also had a bit of a ecosystem opportunity where we were fragmented in the way we went to market. We were buying some of our video through one agency and biddable media video through a different agency. We did some testing, decided to consolidate all into one, and that enabled us to really get onto a journey where we could consolidate our video buying into our DSP, reduce a lot of overexposure, and squeeze more reach out of that investment. So our budgets weren't going up, despite all those rates going up and everything else at some of the big partners. We still had a goal to deliver more incremental buyers to our brands, to drive new growth, and to increase our ROIs. And for us, it was about that opportunity to squeeze overexposure from all these different partners, putting them into one DSP. And then we also saw, as a result of that, about 20% of our investment in the video space get reinvested into that reach. On top of that, we saw greater effectiveness, anywhere from plans, media effectiveness KPIs going up from anywhere from 7% to over 50% in terms of those performance results. So to us, that was a huge opportunity, and we continue to bring in new streaming partners into that buying system. Linear at the time was probably over 70% of our mix, and now it's going below 50. So we're going to continue on that trend, and a big part of that is that intersection, as we mentioned, with retail media, and oftentimes that disruption brings unplanned opportunities our way, and that's one of the ways we've been capitalizing on it.
I think that's one of the most exciting things about fast-changing markets. Keeping on the theme of deduplication, I'd love to learn a bit more about how you guys are managing the both offline and online deduplication in both measuring your media results, but also providing positive experiences to all the Danone consumers.
I think one of the benefits we've seen in working with some of the retail media partners is that we're able to see where some of the impressions are getting served, and then we're able to see, from whether it's offsite or it's on their O&O. And offsite, it could be anywhere from, standard display, top websites to social media to streaming audio, streaming video partners. But we're also able to see where the conversions are happening. Is it happening in their stores? Is it happening online? Are they getting it through delivery? Are they doing a pickup? So that data visibility allows us to help manage where we're investing. And we're also getting a little bit closer to coordinating our plans with our shopper marketing teams, typically different budgets, a little bit more of an advanced planning cycle on the calendar, but because we're now working a little bit closer with some of the same customers in their world, media partners for us, that's enabled us to coordinate a lot more of the total portfolio investment to make sure that we're getting less overexposure, better consumer experience, more sequential messaging. Sometimes one of the things that we did in our live test when we were moving the video business was to assess whether or not the team could coordinate upper funnel brand messaging with different product message. Like, so Silk is a master brand for us. It's in milk, plant-based milk. It's in yogurts. It's in creamers. So we were running some very large brand messaging and video around our upper funnel, if you will, with almond milk. But we wanted to do some retargeting and use that halo to drive sales of Silk creamer and Silk yogurt. We were able to do retargeting off of that master brand with the Silk yogurt brand. So that's another way in which we've been able to use programmatic advertising to help manage the frequency and the exposure of the message.
Yeah, love that story. We're big believers in connecting brand to demand as well, and that's one of the topics that came up yesterday. It's such a critical strategy, but it's not always easy to execute on, so that's impressive. I'd love to kind of take a look in your crystal ball and think about 5 to 10 years from now, really just 5 years from now. Like, where do you see the evolution and the most progress coming in retail media?
I think for right now, it's interesting because we're still, I'd say as a group or as an industry, we're still saying a lot of the same narrative talking points as we were, I'd say, almost 10 years ago. We still have an opportunity to help people understand retail media is still really a lot about that core audience. It's those segments that you're engaging across not only that retailer's O&O, but also across other touch points, both digital and physical. And I think we'll continue to see that evolution. But some folks we might speak to hear retail media and they think it's just a coupon on a small grocery website, grocery store website. And
it's come a long way since those days.
Yeah, when you can show people it's actually reaching some of these loyalty card shoppers who represent the majority of transactions at a national retailer, and that you can connect with those people in a meaningful place when they're watching great programming on some streaming shows, streaming, partners, or they're watching, something on social media, or they're watching a video, whatever it is. That is still an aha moment for a lot of people to understand. And I think we still have a good job to do in terms of explaining that and demonstrating that we can drive incremental growth for brands in doing that. That to me is still going to be ongoing over the next five years or so. But I think we'll continue to see an evolution of that data taking on a bigger role for companies that rely on a lot of third-party data today, moving more to some of that, and growing the scale and trying to coordinate all these different walled gardens, if you will, from the retail media companies.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And just building on that, like, what advice would you give to other brands trying to replicate similar results?
For us, we would say we'd start with the mindset shift. Like, for us, it was really about being agile. A lot of the opportunities we've had that have driven real growth for our brands in the retail media space, they came unplanned. We identified these mega trends of mainstream streaming happened a couple of years ago, thanks to the pandemic accelerating this disruption in video, but then also the omni-channel shopping shift really got accelerated. For us, like when we started to talk to some of the retail partners about opportunities as they were trying to capitalize on this, a lot of their product roadmap or development was happening very quickly. So in Q4 of 2020, Kroger approached us and said, hey, we've got a partnership with Roku. Do you want to reach our loyalty card shoppers watching great streaming shows? We didn't have budget in Q4, but we found a way to negotiate with some of our friends in our global office who wanted to seize on the opportunity, and we made it happen. I think going in with an expectation that this is going to be about driving ROAS was a watch out for us too, and something to think about, as many people still think retail media is a coupon on a website. They might think this is going to be immediate sales, right? And I think for us, we had to remember when we got the kind of mid-campaign or end-of-campaign performance report, this was for one of our brands, Danimals, the ROAS was low, the total sales were low, and initially there's kind of a bit of frustration in you, like, hey, I thought this was retail media and we were going to drive immediate sales. But when we said let's unpack this by the audience data segments that were buying on this plan, we could see that the existing buyers, people who bought the product repeatedly over the last year, massive ROAS, exceeded all benchmarks. But when we look at that from a objective perspective, which was to drive household penetration, real growth, zero incrementality. So that was really a turning point for us. And when we looked at the other audience segments and said, well, who did we reach that had never purchased the brand before, or who had lapsed, who hadn't purchased in the last 12 months? That's where we saw huge incrementality, but very low ROAS, right? Because it was very expensive to reach those people. That was really important for us to say, it's not always going to be about ROAS if your brand objective is to drive household penetration and net new brand buyers. And just yesterday, I got to look at our end of campaign report for a pilot that we did. Walmart Connect launched a very similar program in Q4 over December, January, where they were extending their audiences into different connected TV environments, right? We invested a relatively small amount of money. Again, we had to shake some dollars out of our year-end budget. Yeah. They did a match, which was really important for us to get the feasibility to demonstrate the results. And one of the key things that we saw also was looking at the audiences told us where we got the incrementality. So it was these new to brand buyers, and it was over 32% of them, had driven the sales growth for this particular brand, the Oikos brand that we have. That was really exciting for us, because if you then look at all the people who are repeat purchasers, that's where you didn't see any true incrementality. You saw great ROAS, but that's not what we're looking for. So I think it's really important to understand there's a mindset shift that's required. You need to be agile. You need to be willing to test, learn, and fail, and look at the audiences in great detail. And when your agency team or your brand approves a tactical plan, they're approving the audiences too, right? And I think for us, that's really important, because we don't want to have a situation where a brand manager comes to us, which has happened, like we just cited, and say, why did this happen? I thought I was going to get more sales. Well, let's look at what we approved in terms of those audience segments. So to me, that's really important, and to be able to navigate that story about what's your objective, what's the respective KPI, don't just chase ROAS.
I think that's such a good learning for all of us. It can be such a challenge to pull back from the day-to-day focus of just driving the most ROAS that you really can, but you really have to pull back and say, is this incremental growth? Is this actually growing our business? That's a great learning for everyone. We talked a lot about success and learnings. Are there any challenges or errors that you all made in navigating this disruption that you'd like to talk through? You could share as kind of a case study in a learning.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the beauty, is we want to encourage that test and learn and fail and learn and move on from it. We had one really unique unplanned opportunity came our way through Wavemaker, who has another client who's in the retail delivery space, and we all probably use their app, and they were launching a CPG ad-supported business, so sponsored products, and we wanted to see, could we drive incremental growth? Could we get new to brand buyers, in addition to just all the great organic stuff that happens on the app? Again, it came kind of end of year. We had to scrape budgets, shake those ad server budgets out and everything else, and find enough money to come together to run this test. I think for us, we put together the full product catalog, uploaded it, let it run, and then at the end of the campaign, we looked at the results and said, hey, how did sales, come in by brand? And we saw a brand on there that wasn't ours. sounded like one of ours, one of the brands that we license, but that particular category, it wasn't ours. So that was an aha, like, when you're moving fast and you have to take a look at something at scale, like moving a whole product catalog into a platform to advertise. I think that was a moment where we looked back and said we could have all caught that, and good partner gave us the make good, which we applied, very quickly to another campaign. So, we've had other issues like that with partners. Everybody's moving quickly, everybody's good intention, and certain things have gone sideways, and I think everybody's been willing to make good in one way or another, and it's all been positive, I'd say. I think another opportunity is like we've identified that as this growth that we started with a conversation with in retail media, especially as it brings audiences more and more into connected TV, where many of us are moving our budgets as we head into the upfront cycle, is there's a big risk to that budget shift cannibalizing a lot of the value that many of us get as brand marketers from some of those big media companies that offer that awesome inventory. What I mean by that is, like, we all are familiar with joint business plans or video incentive investment plans, things of that nature, right? But we started looking at a JBP discussion with a media partner, and we're going to fall short of what their threshold is in order for us to unlock value, like creative services, measurement services, better rates, right? That's a direct investment that we would make with them through Wavemaker, and we're going to fall short of that. But when I look at where some of the money has gone to some of these retail media companies who are then retargeting their audiences on that same partner, we will actually eclipse that threshold. So now we have to have a difficult conversation with that partner and say, we deserve the investment credit that's not only coming direct from us through our agency team, but also indirectly from these other buying entities. So I think that's something that we need to be really mindful of, and many clients out there need to be thinking about the same thing, having the same discussions with both the retail media companies as well as the conventional media companies to understand how are we deduplicating or at least collaborating or coordinating this investment, because I think we'll see a massive overlap in the connected TV retargeting that's happening from the retail media with retail media companies with all of the buying that we're going to be doing in the upfront. So now's the time to have those hard conversations and at least coordinate those investments.
That's really interesting, and those are two really good examples of just being leaned in, and I think examples of what true partnership is. We joked about at the start of a conversation, just getting the name right, the known, right? But can you share, there's, I'm sure many existing partners and then prospective partners in the room that would love to know, what other examples or important qualities that you look for in prospective partners?
I think sometimes we say we start with dessert first, like give us an understanding of what the measurement's going to deliver for us. I think back to some of the retail media proposals we had, when I joined Enno a couple of years ago, and these were monster size asks, bigger than any of the upfront broadcaster partners asks, and they've just continued to grow as that growth rate continues to go up. And there was a lot of just spend X in this channel, spend Y in that tactic. But, we had to turn around and say, well, what's the output going to be? Am I going to see share increases? What's my share of voice today in this particular category versus my share of market? Are you sure that's the right level of investment? What could I expect in terms of sales? So really being able to understand what the business impact is and make sure that's incorporated in the pitch or the presentation up front is really important. I think that real clarity on we're going to deliver business results for you, not just media KPIs like efficiencies and thinking about CPM and effectiveness, all those kind of basic media fundamentals. But I think really looking at the back end, the outputs, the measurement, what are we going to really affect for the business? We mentioned before, like focusing on the household pen, net new brand buyers. Like, do you have that capability? Bring it to us. Like, we should know about that. That's really powerful for us to kind of shift the narrative away from, hey, we just delivered X number of impressions to reach, Y percentage of your target audience, and we did it at this rate, and this was our great, video completion rate. We want to talk about, we drove this many new brand buyers, we had this type of halo that affected your brand equity, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's great advice. We talked about some of your more well-known brands, but just curious, are there, what brands in the portfolio that may be new to market that you're especially excited about coming up in the year?
Yeah, so we mentioned some of the big brands like International Delight, Silk, Stoke, which is our national cold brew brand, and it's 420 Day, National Cold Brew Day. It smells like 420 out in New York City streets today, too.
Balance it out with a little cold brew.
Yeah, exactly. They're going to be doing, so I can't say today, but you'll see some stuff in the news soon. They are going to be doing their first large-scale campaign. They were one of the fastest growing food and beverage brands last year nationwide, and we're excited they got rewarded with a nice advertising budget and a sponsorship budget that you'll see kind of do some breakthrough work this year. I think that for us, some of the smaller brands, like they get to do some of these things that are a little bit more disruptive, while some of the bigger brands, they're focused on more, I'd say, conventional. Are we driving the right reach at scale? Are we having enough continuity over a certain number of months, so on and so forth, to really drive the base business? One business in particular that came into the U.S. in last year during the crisis was Aptamil, which is an infant formula brand, and it's number one in Europe. In the U.S., it wasn't known, but many folks here can remember that there was a food crisis in the infant nutrition space last year with a major manufacturer whose facilities were shut down. Our business worked really closely with the government in order to bring that product into the States and to help offset some of that crisis. And for us, it was a real interesting time to start doing some awareness building for that brand. And, we got some good lifts and saw some brand lift for the first time on that brand in the U.S. because it hadn't been here before. It's now got top of mind awareness. It's comparable with some competitors that have been in the market for a while. But this year, we're going to be doing some planning for a bigger launch next year. So for folks who can help us reach new and expectant moms, for people who have any type of health care professional capabilities, whether it's influencers or specific networks that reach those communities, we definitely would like to talk to you, because now's the time we're doing planning for that 2024 launch. It's important. And last year, while we got the product on shelf and had some great partnerships with companies to do it, I also have to give credit. I mean, sometimes ad sales teams within the big retailers might, as they're emerging, might be kind of fighting an uphill battle just to get those merchants to understand the value that they can bring through our partnership with the brands. And that was a case where the product was deactivated on one of the retailer sites because it wasn't necessarily profitable in its first days of launch. But when we advocated for the importance of getting that product to consumers and making it accessible online through our partners in the ad sales team, they called up the vendor managers, had a conversation, and the product suddenly turned right back on. That was a really big win for us. When you think about in the South in particular, half the stores were seeing out of stocks that were really high, and consumers and moms especially, terrified. You can't feed your infant, posting about this stuff on social media a lot. So I think that was a big win, but it's just a start, and we're excited to scale that product out and make it more accessible and to do some things, in-house as well on that brand.
Yeah, that's really great, and solving an immediate need for people. I mean, I have an 8-month-old, so I can relate to some of those stories that you just shared. Before we open it up to questions from the audience, I think we're just about on time. Just a little love to learn a little bit more about, what you're most excited about in the future of retail media.
I am really hoping that it gets us to unlock more investment. I think that many companies have had to be conservative with increasing their media budgets over the last couple of years, right? There's been a lot of inflation. There's been a lot of supply chain disruption. I feel like we and our agency partners and all of our big publisher partners have gone really great lengths to demonstrate how we can do more with what we have. Constantly squeezing the budgets, constantly optimizing them. We're constantly improving ROIs. We're getting really creative with using creative services, measurement services within our existing budgets. We need to increase our budgets, and I think retail media has the ability to help us demonstrate those real business KPIs are moving as a result of our investment. Are we accelerating velocities? Are we helping launch a new brand at scale with a major retailer and getting sales to hit the target faster? Because we're running a full funnel campaign, not just, I think if you go back a few years, the guidance was just fill your search budget to the max with those companies. But you're really only touching a limited audience, right? You're getting people who are already in the store who might know the brand, but you're not really reaching the awareness at scale that you need to get people into the store in the first place. So for now, we have all these great new capabilities and partnerships that have launched that bring the media industry together with the retailers. Yeah. With that audience data really being that glue, we have the ability to truly demonstrate that this media investment is driving incremental net new buyers. It's increasing household pen. It's raising brand equity. That stuff is really key for us all to start visually sharing with executives, especially financial-minded executives, that we drive incremental growth for these businesses, and that's what I think we have the power to do, and that's what I'm excited about because it will unlock more investment.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about driving that incremental growth. So, thank you. I feel like I've learned a lot in the past day meeting you and learning from you. I'd love to open it up to the audience for any specific questions. So we've got one over here.
Thank you. Okay, so my question is, historically, retail media lived with shopper marketing for years, and they kind of considered that their realm of expertise. Now that it has come more over to the media side, how has your team sort of managed that change? How, what role does shopper marketing play versus media, and how do you work together to make sure it's a cohesive team?
You're totally right. I think that goes back to one of the comments before about, we still have a lot to do as a business to educate people that it's not just, a coupon on a website when we talk retail media. And I think there's also, a mindset historically that it's the customer. And whatever they're going to bring our way, we're going to think about it a little bit more and see if we can really do it. Whereas I think the media teams, both at those companies and the publisher partners, and then ultimately on the brand side with our agency partners, they see them as partners, not necessarily as the customer. I mean, if we have the brand budget, we're typically seen on the demand side as the buyer, as the customer, right? I think there's a balancing of the relationship that's happening more now, and I think one of the keys is to be able to bring in that expertise as a complement to what the shopper teams do. We've had the fortune of really good relationships with those folks in our organization, and been able to really draw clear swim lanes for where customer marketing trade budgets cover certain tactics. Like if we go through a scope of work and we look at the line items and we say, hey, search, retail search or sponsored product ads, that should sit with the shopper budget. That might get executed by an e-com search team internally or at an external agency. But then when we start talking about the shopper planning and doing that over the course of the year, we still want them to drive that. We want to then come in and say, okay, we have other budgets that can do more. We can drive more audiences to these brand store pages, so we can own and execute the CTV deals that you keep hearing about in the news because they're going to be a part of the upfront process. We have, great process with our agency team here, and we have great relationships with a lot of those folks, allow us to help bring that budget and that coordination at a tactical level together. And that's how we've been really tackling it, I think, is showing where we have complementary knowledge, where we balance the relationship, and that we have budgets that can be applied, I should say, to different tactics than what they typically do.
Does your team then own the budget for retail media and not shopper marketing?
Yes, there are. In our group, there's 3 different stakeholder teams. So we have our media team, we have our e-commerce team, and then we have the shopper team. So there's technically 2 different budgets that are split amongst those 3 groups, and it's all coordinated in terms of how we lay out the plan with those customers over the course of the year.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Are there any other questions? Awesome. Thanks again, Mike. This is great.